Well, a very good afternoon to you and to all the people that have joined us once again for this series that Orion are hosting. For those of you that have been part of the first couple of sessions, really this is about digital transformation. It's about the selection of the right types of technology for your organization, understanding what resources that you may need or will need to be able to complete that project successfully. And we've covered those in some length and detail in the last previous session. So I would encourage you to please go and listen to those sessions. There's a lot of very good information in there. Before I once again introduce our speakers today, I just wanted to provide acknowledgement and pay our respects to the traditional custodians of the land in which we're gathered today. We certainly pay our respects to their elders, past and present. I think for those on call today, those that haven't or are not familiar with Aurion is a payroll solution organisation that has worked in Australia for many years, and I think that says 750 years of experience. It's not actually that, so we might need to update that, but it is just on 50 years experience. And the platforms that they've developed and the solutions that they've provided have been provided in the Australian market for Australian organisations. And there's many organisations, big and at enterprise level and across government, that Aurion support. And they've asked us to put a series together, not so much concentrating on payroll, but they have in their travels been connected with organisations that have done a lot of activity and work within enterprise space to assist those organisations to pick the right technology. And that leads us to the discussion we are having with Kx2 today. Kx2 Management Group, for those that haven't been part of the first couple of sessions, Karen Keynes and Karen Taylor, which we will call KK and KT from this point on, if that's okay, are the founders and directors of that organisation, and a boutique digital transformation consultancy that works across organisations right across Australia to be able to assist and help them to put in new technology. Today's session is really focused around preparing for project success. And KT, I just really wanted to maybe bring you into this discussion now. I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about what do people need to really understand when it comes to, preparing for project success. And then maybe if we could just touch specifically on how people might refine business processes to ensure they're successful.
Yeah, absolutely, James. And glad to share some information around this because it is very important. So with regards to getting ready for a project, there are some areas that businesses can absolutely take a look at and spend some time working on that will help once they get to that point of starting the implementation of software. And it just allows them to have some clean understanding of their business to be able to do that. So there's three areas that we tend to focus on amongst, a few other things as well. But the main areas are looking at business processes and what the current state is and the future state, having a look at configuration considerations, and then also looking at doing some data cleansing so their data is nice and ready to go. So yeah, happy to delve into business processes a bit more here. And I touched on, mapping the current state versus future state. So essentially that process is about starting to have a look at what do the current systems look like within a business, identifying by mapping out what everything is in that flow, which can really highlight where there are some inefficiencies, and considering what the best practice application might look like to improve those processes so that we land on a future state aspect for that. So in that process, there's obviously a few pain points, that we come across when we're looking at business processes. Often, a lot of those processes may be undocumented, So there are businesses that will have how-to guides in place, but there will also be some that don't, and it might be a bit hit and miss as to which areas of the business they might have those set up for. And the inconsistent approach across processes. So where there's more than one person doing a process within a business, that can vary a great deal with regards to how they have adapted that process to themselves. And then the inefficiencies, I guess, that result for the organisation as a result of having that lack of consistency and the lack of documentation to support those outcomes for their processes. And KT will probably have some things to add in this space here as well.
Yeah, I was just going to bring KT in there. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, KT, when you're actually, boots on the ground and seeing it at that level, I mean, you would probably concur with that, but there's some other things that you're seeing as well that people should be.
Absolutely, James, because, and it seems all fluffy and everything to say, oh, you've got some inconsistencies and you've got some documentations, but when you're in the trenches with these clients and you're working with them, the how-to guide has been done by someone who's been in there for 20 years and it's documented, and then they leave, or they're trying to teach someone and they sit there and they go, well, this is how it's always been done, or this is how you do it. Oh, don't worry about that bit because we don't do it like that anymore, or don't worry about that bit because we've changed the system now, and it's not updated. It's so inconsistent and it's just not accurate, and there's all these changes that have happened and it's not reflective as to how the process is now. So when we say, show me your how-to guides, they're like in, plastic sleeves, and there's all these notes, handwritten notes and changes and everything to it. So although we say most businesses or some or all businesses have how-to guides and everyone has their, what we call their Bible of how-to, it's just not the reality that people have really up-to-date how-to guides. So we do see that it is undocumented. It's just not accurate. It's not an accurate depiction of what the process is. And that's really confronting for clients and businesses because the ownership of, no, we do all right. No, you survive, and business as usual is you actually run a business and you do it well. But when you go in and you just go, well, you haven't got it documented. It's inconsistent. It's inefficient. Those words are actually quite negative. So people find it really confronting to be told they're being inefficient, they're inconsistent. So you have to really tread lightly with how you approach these topics as well to encourage them to go, oh, okay, yep, all right, well, it's not the best scenario to be this, or just be really open, leave the ego at the door and just go, how do we make it better? How can we be open to improvement here? So, refining the business processes and going, yeah, it can be better. There's always better. It doesn't mean what you're doing is bad or how it's always been done is bad. There is no bad. It's just, how can we do it better? So I think when we go in and work with businesses, the inconsistencies, the inefficiencies, the undocumentations, we can drill into any and all of those with the client and identify the gaps with them, and then try to help, funnel them out on the other side in some really good, positive outcome ways. And also work with them ongoingly afterwards and just go, 3 months later, have you even looked at your processes? Have you looked at if something's changed, if you've lost a staff member, if you've changed, if you even need that process anymore? So there's a lot of change with digitalization and automizations. Really makes some obsolete, some processes, some old processes. So refining those automations and digitalization and finding out which is what is making the old ones obsolete. So yeah, I'd probably say that. Don't you think so, KK?
Yes, and I think, the thing that we pick up most is the end-to-end process mapping. So each individual knows what their part is of what they do, but unless you're mapping that end-to-end state of the process, then you're not picking up that actually you know, John is doing entering this data here, and then Mary is entering it again in step 4, and then Anne is entering it again in step 5 to send remittances out or whatever it might be. So it really identifies and highlights, I guess, the points of inefficiency that the organisation may not, as an overall lens, see that is happening. And we actually bring in some business process specialists to help support our clients with that process, because often they won't have the people in-house to be able to do that.
Yeah, and the efficiency is an overarching thing, isn't it, KK, with the process mapping?
Yeah.
There is a lot of duplication there.
Yeah, I suppose I wanted to touch on that a bit, because I think, you know, when we first started the journey together, I mean, we're talking about the fact that a lot of organizations are now looking at that digital transformation. They're looking at inefficiencies within their organization. They're saying, okay, well, we need something to fix this. And then there's all sorts of solutions in market. And then we determine, well, is it actually the solutions being considered? Is it actually going to achieve what we want? I think the first session we had together really covered that in great detail, and I do encourage people to listen to that. And then you sort of talk through, well, do we actually have the resources within the organisation to then be able to fully capitalise and go through a journey to then implement whatever it is that we've selected? So there's a process for selection. Then there's a process about, have we got the right people, and what do we need to be able to achieve it? And I think the important things that you're mentioning here are the fact that the mapping out of the process of what you really want it to be able to streamline and get that efficiency within the organisation is now really critical. And what you're saying, if I understand it, what you're really saying is a lot of the organisations you're going into think that they may have some sorts of things mapped, but ultimately it doesn't seem to be, you know, an overarching map that everyone is aligned to. There seems to be gaps in it, but there are really important components to making sure that each one of those steps and parts of the process are mapped exactly the way you want, in order to make sure that you can be successful for the next stage. Is that a fair assessment of what you've said?
Yeah, and let's use an example that we have with a client that we helped. They have a spreadsheet that multiple managers actually go in and enter in from their department, all the time entries from their staff manually, and they have the ownership and responsibility to accurately enter that in. Human error, red flag goes off, and then each of the managers go in their area. There's about 100 staff. Each area could have 6 to 20 staff. So there's a multiple of, you know, a dozen people manually entering it. Then one payroll person goes in and manually enters that data into the system. Then the payroll person processes the pay. And this was an Aurion client that we worked with to upgrade them into a digital Aurion system, because every single one of those person had the responsibility in the process of their own time capturing, their own entering process, and that onus was on them to capture that, and the responsibility laid with them to capture it correctly, to enter it correctly, but they all had different. So the responsibility and the inefficiencies in that in itself, where then the automation coming into Aurion was really great, because it took away all the responsibility on all those people individually and made an automated system. Therefore, those people didn't have that responsibility or process anymore. They were then allowed to go and do something else in their workspace, in their work environment, that allowed them to shine in their workspace, because they no longer had to do all of that data entry. So that was a really great efficiency in the workspace for them. But a lot of people feel threatened when that happens sometimes. So it's sort of like an example of how you can have resistance as well, when people go, but it's so important that I do this, and my job's at jeopardy, but it's actually not, because the efficiency to the overarching client is a better efficiency, and it allows you to free up time for a lot of staff, which then allows more efficiency for the company. So there's a lot of ticks for the company, but it also allows freedom for the staff to actually be used and utilized with their skill sets better. as well. So that's just an example out there where an Aurion system was implemented to increase efficiency and increase the process. Yeah.
Streamline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And look, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you sort of talk about Orion a bit because and it's great that the series is certainly sponsored by Orion in a lot in many sense, and they've certainly been a catalyst to putting this together. But really, this can be across any kind of technology
Absolutely.
or project you're looking to do. But in the times that we have spent with Orion over a long period of time, there is unquestionably a lot of manual processes that go in payroll, like there would be in all sorts of different areas within an organisation. And one of the things that had been apparent over that journey was that there's a lot of things that people are doing on a daily basis that they just don't like doing. So the trouble that you have, you've got these manual processes in place and people are doing it, and it's not really so much whether they're worried about the change so much as you should be more worried about whether they're going to stay with your organization doing the things that they're doing, which they don't really enjoy, when you can actually get them to not do those things, and then you can get them to be more productive in other areas. So I think that's a really good point that you've raised, KT, and one that everyone on call really should be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do have another client, not an Aurion client, unfortunately, so I won't make mention of the system, but they did have a Key2 super user in the system that was burnt out in their role, and they wished to move on. And we identified them as a really key stakeholder for the project, brought them in. They just excelled in the space in the project, got into the project, really excelled in that space in the digital transformation. So it's really important that they're utilised, because then they stay within the organisation. So the value of a staff member who is utilised in a space and retained, the information is retained, the knowledge of the company is retained, and that is so valuable to an employer. So again, like you say, you don't lose that staff member. So we see that in our clients and in our projects as well. So it's really important for us to identify them as well. So yeah, to your point, absolutely, keeping your staff is really important.
I think one last point to add just to this area, if I can, James, is just very quick, like data. People talk about, not taking rubbishy data and putting it into a new system. The exact same thing applies to business processes. So don't take the same business processes that you've currently got and expect them to perform or output anything different in a new system. So that's why this review of business processes, current state, identifying inefficiencies, adapting it to best practice where suitable, and then creating that future state of processes and workflows means that the outcome of the implementation will be the best for the client.
I actually had one client, I remember, it's a funny story. She said, I don't want this broken process in my shiny new system, because all I have is a broken system in a shiny new, like a broken process in the shiny system. It's not a great system, it's just shiny. Like, if it's a broken process, it's a broken process no matter what it's in. So
yeah, some good points there. Certainly ones that the audience should be considering. But I mean, it really all comes down to making sure that the preparation before embarking on the strategic project is adequately mapped and done, and that you're involving the key people within your organisation to understand how to be able to make it better, and to make sure it's documented in ways that are actually going to lead to success. I think that's probably some of the key learnings, if I just 100%. Take it out of what you said then. Yeah. So let's talk about configuration, if that's okay, a bit, because I think there's...
AK loves talking about configuration, James.
I'm glad. I do think a lot of people suffer pain here in this area too. And unquestionably, no doubt you both see this on a daily basis. And so maybe you could just talk us through what is it that you really see as the big challenge in this area, and maybe some things that the audience should be considering.
Yeah, configuration I do love, because it's a lot of detail and lots of things to do with fields and content and structure. But essentially, it's important to review the structure of your data fields and how that information is captured before you hit the implementation phase. It allows you to identify anything that's obsolete, so anything that is set up for departments or entities that no longer exist. All of those things need to be removed upfront, and then consolidating that information in a way that makes sense, and being able to streamline that configuration data. And a lot of people find that a very overwhelming process because they're unsure what's needed as an outcome for the software implementation piece. And also, if they are making changes, they can be unaware of the overall impact on the organisation as a whole. So if they're making a change in configuration that relates to their area, they may not realise the flow-on effect it has to other areas of the business. Often the review covers off things like organisational hierarchies, the chart of accounts structure, if you're looking at an ERP process, but even for HR and payroll systems, and then the content relevance of what they're putting in there. So, you know, often the information that's required for configuration by the software teams, you might be providing what feels like the same information in 3 different ways, but it's for the intent of being used for 3 very different things. So a quick example here is if you're looking at company information, you might be required to provide you know, the registered company information of the entities and their ABNs and company numbers, etc. But you also may be required to provide their physical locations of the business. So you may have one entity that has 3 physical locations, for example. And then you may be required to provide that information in an organisational hierarchical structure. And those 3 different ways can be used for 3 completely different things. So one might be used for reporting, one might be used for security access, and one might be used for transferring information into journals or whatever it might be. So it's difficult for people who are not used to system implementations to understand that there may be what looks like the same sort of data required for different ways, and how to put that information together. So we help support that process, knowing what the outcome needs to look like for clients, and help take that overwhelm feeling away, because we've seen what needs to be put together for the vendor. And we're also thinking about what the other impacts are on the organisation from any changes that might be made in that space, or highlighting if now is a good time to review what that structure looks like, because there's an opportunity to do that before you do the implementation. And if it's in a state that's clunky and not really working for the business, then maybe it's a great point in time to review. KT, did you want to add?
Well, the only thing I've got to add in here, KK, is and this is why I let you speak to this point, is because you do love the detail, and I am very high level. And my only recommendation, James, to all your listeners and the audience is to find your strength and what you love and what you don't love, and to actually allow somebody that loves the detail to get amongst this. And because I feel very overwhelmed in configuration space, like, because when they're talking about it and it's this and it's that, and I try to get my head around it, and I go, oh, so you're talking about this, and then they say, no, it's this, and I go, oh, okay, I thought I had it, but I don't. And then I can actually feel overwhelmed. And so I step back and I allow KK to shine in that space, because she goes, and it's here and it's here and it's here and it's here. So allowing somebody else to step into a space that they've just got it all nutted out is a really good thing to do. So I'd recommend your audience to find their groove with their team and allow the people to shuffle around and shine in the spaces that they're really good at, because that's where you have a really good collaborative approach to finding what works with each other. And configuration actually needs detail. So if you're a detailed person, get amongst it, sign up. Configuration is your jam. And if you're not, and it's okay to say, I feel overwhelmed. I just need to step out of this and let anyone that's understanding it go in there and do the detail and do the do's. That would probably be my only piece of advice in this configuration space, is that I try to get amongst it and try to get, you know, the detail, but I too get overwhelmed. So I'm best stepping out of it. So yeah.
Yeah, some good points there also. I mean, ultimately, the reason that we put these sessions on is to be able to get people to prepare for success in implementing projects. I think we all understand that the more effort that we can put at the start of this process, the quicker that we're likely to be able to implement it, and with more successful outcomes. And I think that what you've just mentioned there, and getting people into the right lanes, which people are better at doing the detail configuration components, which people are doing, you know, more of the high level, potentially what we want as an outcome as an organization. Those sorts of things should be identified. Once we've got them into those areas, then to make sure that we've got the set teams, you know, specializing in the fields of interest, to be able to then work harmoniously to be able to deliver a better project quicker.
Absolutely.
So, and I will talk, you know, in a minute, just about some of the ways that you assist and help organisations do that. But in some of the previous sessions, I think what we really covered and identified was this is not necessarily a journey that organisations should embark on themselves without some type of independent analysis or assistance in being able to say, hey, look, we've done this a lot of times. We've seen a lot of different processes, a lot of different ways that people are implementing technology, and we can bring some real thought and rigor to the process of being able to actually do the implementation in the way that's going to best serve the organisation.
It's just not an upsell on us. We can really bring some clarity and calm, James, because we've done it, we've seen it. We just do it every day. And we like seeing it successfully done. We actually like serving others and making sure that it's done the right way, because we can see how much it improves a work-life balance, that we know that the people, and I think I've said this probably on both the other sessions, or I've said it time and time again, that it's the people in the workplace that go home to their families, they're happy, they play with the kids, they're not burnt out, they get to have dinner, have a joke around the table, and we know that impacts them. And that's what makes us happy, that drives us to, you know, make the decisions with the decision makers of a business to improve the lives of their staff. They come to work, they're happy. They go home, they're happy. If they're happy and their lives are happy, their kids are happy, they just have a happy work-life balance. And we've had some impact in that, then that's our driving force. We've been able to serve that. So if we've had that impact out there and we hear that once or twice, then yeah, that makes us happy.
Yeah, no, without question. I think your 100% success in implementation of projects probably is a pretty good testimonial to so I mean, I don't want to pump your tires too much, but that's a reasonable track record, given how complex projects are to be able to do successfully, and to make sure that people within an organisation are all tied together to achieve it. So, but anyway, look, in the few minutes we've got left, and just conscious of time, I really want to maybe just talk about data, because this is almost one where you could have your own session just on data cleansing alone. And it's not so much just data cleansing, is it? It's getting data in and out of systems. And I know that this is a really, really big bugbear for so many organizations. I mean, they've got unstructured data all over the place. They've got, you know, different systems where information's in and out. They don't really know how to be able to best get that into an environment that's going to then assist and help the new project that they're putting in place. Did you have some, you know, some thoughts that we could just share in a few minutes just before we wrap today's session up?
As complex as it is, for me, it's really simple. You have to have the same format. You have to have it in the required fields. You have to remove all the clutter. Like, it just has to be decluttered of all the stuff that doesn't need to be in there. It needs to be formatted the same, just the required fields. And bang. It's that simple. All your states need to be all capitals, all 3 letters, or all lowercase, or like, but it just has to be consistent. All your email addresses all have to be lowercase. All your addresses, the address line number 1 has to be used for unit 1. Address line number 2 has to be used for 123 ABC Street. Your address number 3, and you can't use address line number 3 has to be used for she likes pink, or, you know, you can't use fields for things that aren't relevant, because then that's when you start customizing the system to fit your company, which then doesn't work with upgrades. And then that's when systems falter and can't be upgraded, can't be, you know, integrated. And that's when you have huge problems. You just need to be very diligent. Is that the right word, KK?
Yeah,
with how you store your data and use the systems. It's really neat bookwork. That's like your data just has to be clean.
Look, it's a really interesting one, and I think you know, for those on call today, there'll be examples that you can share of how to be able to help organizations get there. But it's not just, you know, in getting their current data to a state that's going to be ready. It's then from there, anything in the future that's going to be inputted needs to be in the same formats also.
Absolutely.
And so that might be the fields and what you're capturing and how you're capturing it, but that also can't
and that circles back to your processes.
That's right.
Like
but I think a pretty critical point that everyone really should consider. And so maybe as you start having different discussions with people that may reach out to you, and that you know, maybe they're having a little trouble in that area, and being able to understand how to configure things properly and how to cleanse their data in a way that's going to be right for projects, maybe you could share some different examples with them on ways that, you know, you've seen data you know, in the different formats that potentially organizations have had, the complexities and some of the challenges that data is then presented, to then being able to come up with a unified system for them that is likely to actually achieve the goals and tasks that they're looking for in terms of implementing the new technology. I think that would be valuable.
Yeah, and for anyone in the audience, James, I would say if your data's not clean, be prepared to do some hard, long hours to get it clean, to then be efficient long term.
Yeah.
It's like short-term pain, long-term gain.
Yeah, data in, data out. So I think
absolutely.
Well, that's terrific, KT and KK. I want to thank you very much for your time as well today. I think that that will cover off our session for today, and then we've got some more sessions coming up, which I'm looking forward to having and getting your input on. To all of you that have joined today and have taken time out of your day to be able to have a listen to this, I hope you found this valuable. It's certainly very interesting when you come across experts like KK and KT that are just so knowledgeable in this space and have helped so many organisations. That it's terrific to be able to have their input as people start embarking on more complex projects within their organisation. So I want to thank you very much for your time as well. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, everyone.